At dawn the Red Keep took the color of old bone, and the city below it was a smudge of smoke, and roofs, and restless tide. In the hands solar, before the gongs could rattle the courtyards to wakefulness, Tywin Lannister sat with a candle grimed in wax and a map of the realm laid out under his fingers. The parchment had been smoothed and smoothed until it yielded like leather. The hills of the Westerlands were burnished to a sheen beneath the slow movement of his thumb, and the inked coastlines of the Blackwater had grown faint from constant study. Knots of thread weighted with lead seals pinned the corners down against the morning breeze that slipped through the shutters. The breeze smelled of furnace smoke from Flea Bottom, and the river's sour breath, and of something else. The city's animal musk, its layered decay, and heat, and hunger. But beneath it Tywin could detect beeswax and steel oil, and the faint lemon-seed spritz that lingered in the chamber since his servants had scrubbed every table down at last light. The hand's chain was cool at his collarbone. It lay as it always did, heavy but not burdensome. Its linked hands and fingers clasped one another at every joint. He had the habit of lifting one of those little hands and rolling it against his palm, as if it could turn. It never turned. It only pressed back the skin with its quiet insistence. He released it and arranged a sheet of parchment on the map's lower border. A quill scratched as cleanly as a blade on a whetstone when he wrote. He drafted 3 letters and destroyed 2 others. Precision in language could be more decisive than a cavalry charge. One letter, to Randall Tarley, was written with compliments that were not compliments and a promise that contained no promise. Your valor at the Blackwater is not forgotten, nor will it go unrewarded. The justice proceeds in due order. One letter, to Paxter Redwine, was steeped in old wine and fatherly tone. The sea keeps its own calendar, Lord Redwine, and it is the calendar of the crown. The third, which he did not finish, began with Lord Euronwood, though he paused there and set the quill aside. The Dornish required care. They carried their insults like heirlooms. He was sealing the first letter when he heard it. Not footfalls. Varys' steps were always water over pebbles. It was the hush that accompanied Varys, as if a net were drawn over sound. The latch clicked. The door opened with the smallest sigh. "You rise with the gods, Lord Hand," said the eunuch from the threshold. "Men wake earlier than gods," Tywin said. He did not look up. "Close the door." Varys closed it. The rustle of pink silk approached without hurry. Varys' scent came with him, a whisper of tuberose and powder that never seemed to cling to any surface but the man himself. Tywin pressed the seal into warm wax, and the lion's face took shape at once on the red pond of it, crisp-teethed and watchful. "You have slept?" Varys asked. "I do not answer questions that begin with whether." "Then forgive me." The eunuch folded his hands within his voluminous sleeves. "May I tell you a story instead?" "One sentence," Tywin said. He set the sealed letter in the wooden tray and slid a blank parchment before him like a fresh field. "If it interests me, you may say too." "A boy has arrived at the city with his father's eyes," said Varys. The quill paused. Tywin did not lift his head. "If you are here to deliver poetry, you should go whisper to the fools by the sept who bathe in incense and riddles." "I would never profane your morning with incense," Varys said mildly. "This boy's eyes are not a riddle. They are the color that was once reflected in every fountain at the Dragon Pit, in the blades of every Kingsguard sword. I have seen them before, Lord Hand. Long ago, when a prince used to come to council and not speak unless speech was demanded of him." Tywin exhaled once through his nose. He had not forgotten the look of Rhaegar Targaryen. The memory was as fixed and unwelcome as an old scar. Sunlight in hair, that grave courtesy which disguised iron will, the music that had wasted his hours when there were better uses for a prince's hands than strings. He remembered Rhaegar's eyes the day the prince had ridden up the steps of the Red Keep to show his father some trifle. A book bound in blue ivory, Tywin thought. And Aerys had made of it an occasion for madness. The boy had not flinched then. A stone could not have shown less. That composure had irked Tywin more than tears would have. He loathed the mask on any man but himself. "What father?" Tywin asked. Varys' lips curved without warmth. "The one who died on the Trident. The one you hoped would marry your daughter. The one who crowned another, And so this boy was supposed to die with his sister under your soldiers' knives. Tywin looked up. For a heartbeat, the room was only the backs of books, and the light cutting off the windows and Varys around, hairless face, bland and mortal as any baker's. The face of a man who took no offense because he held none. A cold that was not fear traced his spine. There had been babies that night, and blood, and the smell of heat escaped from long-held iron. Tywin had been told, and had accepted the telling. He had not asked to see the bodies with his own eyes. A lord need not inspect every barrel to know there is wine in his cellars. It had been a piece in a game at the time. Later, it had become an accusation passed from mouth to mouth with relish, as if those who spoke it could be cleansed by saying the name of the filth and pretending they had not stepped in it themselves. "The mountain did not fail me," Tywin said. Varys bowed his head as a man might upon receiving a title. "The mountain succeeds at what is asked of him. Still, children sometimes slip away from mountains. The Rhoyne has many channels." "Say the name," Tywin said. "The boy calls himself Aegon." Varys watched him as a cat watches a pond for ripples. The last time a boy of that name was presented in King's Landing, bells rang until the pigeons fell off the rooftops. Tywin laid the quill flat and slid it away from the parchment. He took the time to fold the blank sheet in half. He took the time to set his signet upon the folded sheet and weigh it, as if it were a contract under his ring. When he was done, his hands were empty and clean on the table. "Where," he asked, "is this Aegon?" "In the bowels of the city where it is safest," Varys said. "He has been brought ashore with all the care a mother gives a fevered child. No banners, no trumpets, no harpists. He is tired. His journey was not short, but he is here." Tywin let his gaze stray to the window. The light had strengthened. The city outside took a bit more shape. The stubble of chimneys, the slow puff of a laundry's steam, the thin black thread of a procession of donkeys heading toward the fish market. A gull printed a white arc past the shutter. Tywin's own breath was steady. He did not feel the quickness that had sometimes come to him before battle, the measured rage that preceded killing. He felt the exactness that preceded the act of drawing up a new ledger. "I have a king," he said. "A boy too," Varys murmured. "A boy who needs men to think for him until he thinks for himself. The realm is not kind to boys who must lean on others, but refuse to choose the shoulders they lean upon. Nandamchol. He is my blood," Tywin said. He let the words lie between them like a length of iron. "Whatever else the world says of him, he's my blood. And he sits the throne with the blessing of the faith and the swords of the reach." "There are many blessings in the world," Varys said. "Some of them come with dragons painted upon them." "Dragons," Tywin said, "burn when they grow too fond of their own fire." Varys smiled. "As do lions when they roar too long." Tywin did not grace that with acknowledgement. "Proof," he said instead. "You shall have proof." The eunuch reached into his sleeve and produced a small leather pouch, so innocuous it might have held pins. He set it on the table without pushing it toward Tywin. The hand did not reach for it either. A little ritual, "This is yours, if you will have it," was being observed by both men, and neither named it. "Hair," said Varys, "from the boy's head before it was dyed. A tapestry fragment taken from the manse where he was kept as a babe. A ring from a nurse who has carried a name in her mouth for 17 years. And," his voice thinned almost to nothing, "a song." Tywin's face did not change. "I do not trade in songs." "I know," said Varys, "but there are songs a man learns with his bones. He will not sing it for you, not yet. But he knows the words that only two men now living would recall if they had stood at Prince Rhaegar's shoulder the morning he first played it for his friends. I am a poor singer, you know, but I recall it too." "You presume a great deal about what I will indulge," Tywin said. "I presume a great deal about what you want," Varys returned. And there, beneath the silken powder, there was a hardness, a glimpse of the steel that had brought him from a mummer's stage to the small council chamber. "You would not have me in this room if you believed your work was done, Lord Hand. The realm has eaten its own for 3 years. The fat lords are thin, and the thin are dead. The crown's debts breed like rats in the vaults. The Tyrells are your, how shall I say, employers as much as allies. They are content to fatten their flocks while you keep the wolves at bay. The Iron Bank sends letters with language more precise than your own. If a boy with purple eyes can make the letters stop, if he can open the grain stores, and close the mouths of the faith, and make the Dornish breathe without spitting, then a man who places that boy on a throne will be remembered as the father of the realm. Nenderol. I am already its father, Tywin said quietly. Varys dipped his head. All the more reason to choose which son will be worth the name. There was a long silence then, but it was not empty. Tywin felt the weight of contingencies click into place one upon another. He would not, could not, be moved by sentiment. He weighed coin. He weighed bread. He weighed the hunger that stalked on nimble feet and slipped under doors and sat at tables uninvited. He weighed the roses that had taken the court and the shame of needing them. He weighed the girl in Dorne who was his son's child to the world if not to the faith, and what her existence might yet buy or cost. He weighed his grandson's hands, soft and clean and small. He weighed a 9-year-old king and a 9- and 10-year-old king, and the lives that would feed each. Bring him to me, Tywin said. Varys did not bow. He simply vanished the way thick smoke will when the window is opened. Tywin listened to the latch click again. He looked down at the map. He moved the small carved lion that sat on the Blackwater to the lightless square that represented the cellars under Maegor's holdfast. He sat back and let his eyelids fall, not in weariness, but to see the picture he wanted without the interference of color. He saw a hall lit by late afternoon, a boy walking toward him upon rushes freshly strewn to hide the smell of old meat and old men. He saw blue-black hair cropped close, a jaw that had found its line but not yet filled with flesh, a mouth that would harden or soften by choice. He saw eyes that were either an inheritance or a trick. He did not assume he could not be deceived. He only assumed that he could profit even from deception. He rose and rang for his armorers. While his body servants came with his black wool doublet and his chain of linked hands, he told one to send for Kevin and one to find Qyburn, and tell him the Hand would speak with him after midday about fire and the uses of it in streets. He told another to prepare the tower's lower stair. He told no one else anything, because men too useful for speculation quickly became degraded by command. When he descended to the underways that honeycombed the foundations of the Red Keep, he did so without a single guard in Lannister crimson. 2 gold cloaks were at the head of the stair and 2 at its foot. That was show enough for any servant who passed by. The rest were shadows. The stone was damp and smelled of lichen and rat droppings and old limestone that had been sweating since the Conqueror's masons sealed their work. Tywin's boot heels made an authoritative little tap that was eaten quickly by the walls. He did not slacken his pace. He did not increase it. To do either would be to betray agitation or fear. He felt neither. He felt only certain, specific attention. The chamber they had chosen for this interview was not large. It had the shape of a bishop's tomb, low and heavy-ceilinged, with a bench cut into the stone itself, and a niche that once might have held a cresset. It held 2 now, bracketed iron baskets whose coals exhaled heat without flame. The glow gave the chamber the look of a dragon's throat. Varys waited in the penumbra, as if to show the boy where to stand. 2 other figures stood behind him. One lurked at the edge of sight, big with that particular mass that comes from a life spent in mail, not fat. The other had the precision of a man whose health is a careful fiction. Tywin recognized Lord John Connington at once, not from any portrait but from the way Varys had once spoken of him. Quietly, admiringly, as men speak of a hunting dog who ran well, was lost, and turned up again with a new scar and a new wariness. Connington's hair had gone pale. Powder dusted his gloves as if he'd been handling chalk. He did not move, except for his eyes. They were cool as winter water. He looked past Tywin out of courtesy, as if to give the boy his due. The boy stood square under the light. Varys had not lied about the eyes. They were not purple, for no eye is. They were a color that had purple inside it, the way a bruise has yellow inside it on the 3rd day. It was too rich a color to live in any peasant's face. His jaw was set in the manner boys practice in front of a looking glass. There was a thinness to him born of travel and discipline, not want. He wore no jewel. A plain belt held a plain sword, and Tywin, who knew steel as he knew words, saw that the blade was good without being excellent. Someone had decided the boy should not appear a peacock, and in that decision there was better sense than in a dozen banners. "Your Grace," Varys said, his voice like silk curtains being parted. "The hand of the king." The boy bowed. Not too deep. Not with the small sly smile of a boy, pleased to be called what he believes he will be. The bow was measured, as if handed down from a father to a son as a lesson. A man may show his neck, but he never abandons his spine. "Lord Lannister," the boy said. The voice was young and not yet raw with command. There were traces of the free cities in the vowels, as there are burrs in the wool of a flock that has come too long over hedged fields. "I am grateful to stand before you." "You should be grateful to stand at all," Tywin said. He did not step closer. He let the words do that. "It is not a safe city for boys who claim what you claim." "Nothing worth claiming is safe," the boy answered. It was too quick, and he knew it. He felt the cheapness of his cleverness as soon as it left his mouth. He lifted his chin, the fraction that turns cleverness into bravery. "So I am told." Tywin regarded him without expression. He had once looked upon Joffrey and seen a boy gilded to hide rot. He had looked upon Tommen and seen sweetness that would go soft in the sun if not shaded. He had looked upon Robb Stark and seen a stripling whose victory would be the seed of an older man's learning. He looked upon this boy and saw the possibility of something other than boys. Not a man yet, but the promise of one who would remember his lessons and not always obey them. "Some men," Tywin said, "succeed because the world is aligned to their ambition. Most succeed because they have the stomach to align it themselves. My father failed to align it," the boy said. There was no tremor in the word father. He said it as one recites the list of a household's winter stores. "I will not." "What do you know of your father?" Tywin asked. "That he was beloved by men and not loved by the woman he chose to love," the boy said. "That he had a hunger that drove him to books and songs. That he went to the field because he could not turn his hunger to grain. That he did not flee when he might have lived to try again. That he made a mistake on the trident and died for it and made orphans of those who were not yet children." He did not blink. "What do you know, Lord Lannister?" "That he was worthy of a better father," Tywin said before he had weighed the sentence, which startled him. He supposed he had thought it for years and had left it in his mouth by accident. He allowed himself the faintest curve of lip that could be called humor if one were generous, and called cruelty if one were honest. He would have made a poor king without the right hand. "Then I will require one," the boy said. Connington's eyes shifted the smallest degree, not to Tywin, but away from him. As a man shifts when he hears a bell he has long expected and does not yet know whether it calls him to prayer or to judgment. Varys's glance went downward with admiration so well practiced it might have been sincere. "You require many things," Tywin said. "Grain, dine, ships, fire in the streets, when necessary, water when fire suffices too well, the loyalty of men like Lord Tarly, who prefer oaths that bind others more than themselves, swords from the reach that will perceive their interest to be your own, a marriage." "Now," the boy did blink then. "To whom?" Tywin let the silence fill the chamber until it had weight. Then he said, "To my granddaughter." Connington's breath was not audible. It was visible, a narrowing at the nostrils. Varys did not change, but Tywin sensed his pleasure as a warm bowl of cream senses a cat. "Myrcella," the boy said. The name was a clean, pale stone placed on the table between men. He had not said princess. "She is in Dorne." "She is," Tywin said. "She's a Baratheon to the city and Lannister to the blood. Dornish marriage binds long. The sands keep what falls into them. If you are to keep the Stormlands, and you will take them if you are to mean anything at all, you will do it with a princess of Dorne on your arm, or with Dorne's goodwill in your purse. There will be no quarrel between us if the purse is heavy enough." "Then you would give me your blood to buy me," the boy said. "I would give my blood to buy the realm," Tywin said. and every word was an iron coin, and to buy the future of my house within it. Myrcella is good and gentle and has never harmed a spider. That makes her worth something to me. It also means she will never be the thing that devours my line. You will need sons that the realm believes in. You will need the West's coin and its pride. You will need the quiet certainty that when you speak, strong men in 4 directions lean forward to hear whether it is their safety or their doom that you utter. Myrcella is the price of that certainty. The boy studied him with that new, unscarred scrutiny that belongs only to the young. And Tommen is a child, Tywin said. He will be a child in Casterly Rock with hounds and tutors, and a future that contains all comforts that do not include a throne. It is not the worst life to be spared. This child is king, Connington said. His voice was frost on stone. Your Grace, he is their king today. To give him hounds and comfort is mercy, they would say. To take his throne is treason. Treason is a word for the defeated to fling at the victorious, as they are led out to die. Tywin said, turning his head just enough to look at Connington, and no more. Do not use it in this chamber. You have lived long enough to be accused of it by fools, and called faithful by fools. Enough. Then? Connington did not flinch. Say rather that you will kill one boy to raise another. I will try to prevent both being killed, Tywin said. That is the extent of mercy practicable in this city. The boy, Aegon, stood and did not shift his weight, though the urge came to him. Tywin saw it. The urge to step back, to look to the man behind him, to find the right moment to speak again. He did neither. He kept his eyes where they were supposed to be. He had been well taught, or he possessed a trait rarer than breeding. He could force himself to behave as his mind commanded, even when his heart fought him. What would you do? Aegon asked. Say there is proof for you. Say you believe. Say you choose. Tywin took the leather pouch at last and sawed the knot with his thumbnail. He did not take out the hair or the tapestry thread or the ring. He allowed the thing to remain simply an object which contained the possibility of binding. He put the pouch down. He placed both palms on the table of air that existed between him and the boy. I would do what men praise as cunning and gods call wicked, he said. I would move you south, not through the city but around it, into the heart of the Stormlands, where the name of your supposed father's friend is worth more than a fleet. I would take Storm's End not with scale and roar, but with a man who opens the right door and the next door for coin, because coin does not argue with a conscience. I would bring your banner to sit over those chalk cliffs, and I would do it before anyone in the Reach believes you can. I would send men to take the Trident's crossing points and hold them without battle, and I would write a letter in my granddaughter's name that makes of Dorne a part of you without asking it to rise. I would keep you from the city until the city is ready to believe it asked you to come. I would put bread into mouths and say your name every time a hand opens a granary latch. And when you come, you will not come as a conqueror. You will come as the return of order. More dangerous men than you have failed. Men less capable have succeeded. Those who succeed were not loved. They were needed. Nender saw it. And if I am not needed, said Aegon. You will be made so, Tywin said. That is a hand's work. The boy let out a breath he had not been aware he held. It came back to him as controlled air, and not the gasp of a child freed from a held plunge. Tywin watched the small triumph of that restraint, and approved it as he would approve the stance of a horse that takes the bit without fuss. If I refuse your granddaughter, the boy said. What then? Then you will be dead or exiled within a year, and the men who call you your grace will go back to calling each other my lord, as they always have. Tywin's tone was as gentle as frost. You can choose to believe that or not. I say it without pride. It is simply the grain of the wood we are cutting. My mother's line will not like it, Aegon said. They will say I stoop to Lannister. They will say I marry the lion who cut off my house's paws. Ben Tywin. Then you may teach them to count, Tywin said, and to eat. Connington's glove made the tiniest creak. Do you think, he asked, finally abandoning courtesy for the forward step that had been building in his chest, that he will thank you when he is king? Kings who thank me are not required, Tywin said. Kings who obey the arithmetic of power are. A flicker, near the coals, and a spark fell, and went black among the ashes. Varys stepped back as if the spark were a herald. "Shall I arrange the letter for Dorne?" he asked in that soft voice that men found so soothing when it came to tell them they were being led to their own funeral. "I will dictate it," Tywin said. "And you will find the man who knows the inner stair of Storm's End and the bell schedule of the watch. Have him by dusk and have his price by dawn." "His price may be his conscience," Varys murmured. "Then he can pay it to the stranger," Tywin replied. Aegon's hands had relaxed. The veins had left the backs where they had been raised by tension. He looked older by the measure of a single conclusion accepted. "If I take your granddaughter," he said, "I will do it not because you command me but because I choose it." Tywin inclined his head, except it was not a bow. "A king must believe he chooses." "I will be no king, Tommen," Aegon said. "Be sure you are not a king, Viserys," Tywin returned. "The world is cruel to boys who know they are kings and to kings who are still boys." He half turned then, a gesture that meant the audience was ending, and the coals painted his cheek with copper. "Lord Connington, you may keep lying to yourself about me or stop. It makes no difference. You will do what is required because you have tried doing otherwise, and it broke you. Varys, tell Qyburn and I will see him at midday." "Your Grace." He did not look at the boy, and so did not see the flush that came with that title. A flush that was not vanity, but urgency. 8. "Pa, you will be instructed which men to listen to when your stomach is full." And now, when he left the chamber, he took with him the knowledge that something had already changed in the realm. Whether the boy were a prince or only a well-tutored orphan with a brace of stories, he had made an offer that could not be untied without knives. He disliked knots that required knives to untie. He preferred knots that opened because his fingers had learned them first. He stepped into the stair's cool shaft and breathed the stone again, as if it were a reminder that the world outlasted every name. 3 turns of the steps, and the smell changed. The kitchen layers of fat and flour and old smoke. The honest stink of boiled bones and herbs in a pot. A servant girl brushed past with a tray of onion tarts and did not recognize him. Her hair smelled of rushlight and lavender. It stirred something like pity in him. Not for her, but for the fact that men lived inside scents and so could be led by them. He shook the thought away, as one shakes off a cobweb strand when it clings to the face. In his solar again, he sat and pulled a fresh sheet. His quill dipped. He wrote to Doran Martell with a restraint that cost him nothing and would be read as magnanimity. There were turns of phrase that spoke of long memory and longer desire. "It is an old wound that we ask to be bound, but flesh heals when there is a heel upon the serpent's head." He wrote the word Myrcella, and did not write the words hostage or assurance. He wrote the word son when he referred to the boy in Dorne whose life had been spilled long ago, and was now a currency no one liked to admit they were spending. He did not write Aegon. He wrote instead the phrase a claimant who is not a pretender, which was exact and imprecise both, and could be repeated in 100 halls by men who prided themselves on prudence. He sealed it. He wrote to the Iron Bank and forbore to threaten or to grovel. He informed, with a calm that a scribe would admire, that certain revenues would be regularized within 2 months, and that a shipment of gold would be sent once a tariff law was clarified in Old Town, language that told the clever that something was being arranged. He set down the quill and allowed his eyes to pass once over the map. The lion piece still sat where he had placed it in the dark square that marked the underways. He moved it again, not to the throne room or to the Blackwater, but to the pale chalk square of Storm's End. "Send for Sir Adam," he told a waiting page who had crept inside, hoping for orders like a hound hoping for a scrap. "And tell Sir Harris that his men are not to drink from the same bucket as the Kettleblacks. If I hear of it, they will both be on the galleys." "Yes, my lord," the boy murmured, frightened by something he could not name in Tywin's voice. It was not anger. It was that particular stillness which preceded a storm on a flat sea. "Also," Tywin said, "send word to the High Septon that the Queen will attend evening prayers tomorrow." He did not specify which queen. The error would produce a better conversation than the fact would. He allowed himself one moment of private thought after the boy had gone. He thought of Cersei and the prophecy she had once listened to with a child's secret hunger. He thought of her hands as a girl, thin and quick about a comb. He thought of her mouth as a woman, tight around fear, and then around the words that killed fear. He did not think of Tyrion at all. It was not that he forbade himself. He simply did not think of stones once they had been thrown far. Elsewhere in the city, while he worked his quiet iron, a boy he intended to make into a king was led up a different stair and out through a door that opened behind a grubby tannery in the Street of Lamps. The light struck Aegon like a blow. He had grown used to the ship's half-dark, the manse's shadowed courtyards, the star-studded vault of the river's tunnels. King's Landing in full morning was a beast breathing in his face. Heat rose from the paving stones as if the dragon under the city had rolled closer to its shell. The market already shouted. The shouts had an order to them, a pattern of hunger and barter that he had once learned in a very different town. Ish. Incher. Shoes with nails for men who would walk to the wrong place in good shoes, if they were given them. He smelled tar and cinnamon, and the meaty sweetness of figs split with a thumbnail and licked without shame. John Connington walked a step behind him. He had his hood up, though the heat brought sweat to his lip and salt to his gloves. He did not look at Aegon because looking would invite acknowledgement, and acknowledgement would invite public attention. It was a dancer's rule applied to survival. The eye draws the eye. Varys had given them this route. It cut through the underflesh of the city like a physician's secret cut. They came upon a lane where children chalked dragons on the stones, and then flapped their hands as wings and shrieked when a dog barked. One boy had purple beads sewn into his cap and squinted as if that could turn the beads into eyes. Aegon paused at that for a heartbeat, and his own eyes softened in recognition of a joke the world played without cruelty. A woman at a stall held up a bolt of yellow cloth and cried, "For your lady, my lords, 7 silks for the price of 6. No one else called them lords. Most eyes slid past. They were another pair of men in a city that had no place for the notion that some men were different unless those men came with banners and backed by the sort of violence that could stop conversation. "Do you believe him?" Aegon asked without turning his head. "Which he?" Connington said. "Both his," Aegon said, a shade of humor like graphite on paper. "The spider. The lion." "I believe the spider profits by being believed," Connington said. "I believe the lion profits either way." "And we," Aegon said. "We profit only by being right." Connington let a beat pass. "We profit by being ready when others are wrong." Aegon stopped then, so abruptly that Connington almost stepped into him. Before them a wagon had broken a wheel. The man soothing the mule was not in a hurry. The mule was. The axle had bitten into the cobbles and chewed them to dust in a little crescent. The sky was a lid without seam. It would be hotter by noon. The city would grow sharper and then uglier. Aegon had been taught this. A place has its humors. Learn them. Use your own to stir them. He looked down at his hands. He was learning the humors of his hands. They had callus where his sword hilt lay. They had ink on 3 fingers because he had insisted on copying maps rather than being read to. And they had the faintest inkling of tremor which came and went depending on nothing he could predict. He could hold a blade. He could read a ledger. He did not yet know whether he could hold a room the way his father had held men. He did not know whether he wished to. He was full of wishes and of discipline. It made a noise inside him like a kettle, just shy of boiling. "Would you have given me to him?" he asked suddenly. "If I had been only a shipmaster's son with the right eyes and the right stories and the right ring?" Connington did not say the word yes. He said, "I have spent 17 years ensuring you would never have that question, and here you are asking it in the street, opposite a woman selling onions." Aegon laughed then, unexpected even to himself. It was a quick, genuine sound. The onion seller smiled without knowing why. A man turned to see what was bright in the air and then turned away. They walked on. In the Red Keep's taller shadows, Cersei Lannister sat before a polished mirror of Valyrian steel framed in chased silver and stared at her own mouth. The lips were full and still young. The lines at their corners had grown sly lately, but they were not deep. A sleeping draught of powdered pearl had smoothed them last night. She had slept badly regardless. Half of sleep was in mastery, not in drafts. Cersei mastered men and did not master sleep. When she raised her eyes, she saw above her own reflection a piece of painted ceiling where a lion chased a hind through a scroll of vines. The hind was always just ahead. The lion had its paw raised in perpetuity, and its mouth open in a roar that never ended. She disliked the painter. She wished him back from his grave to whip him for his insolence. "Your Grace," Pycelle wheezed from the doorway as a cat wheezes after its own tail. "The High Septon has sent." "Later," she said. She did not look at him. "Send the Kettleblacks to the outer ward and make them keep the men sober." "Yes, Your Grace," he murmured, but he remained hovering like a moth that cannot remember whether flame burns. "There is a curious stir among the gold cloaks this morning." Some movement along the lower stair. She turned then, and her hair, heavy and golden, whispered against her collarbone. "Whose order?" "I could not say," he mumbled. "Then find out," she said. He flinched. She felt better for that. It was a small sharpened fruit in a mouth gone stale. When the old man had gone, she looked again at her mouth, and did not think of prophecy, because she did not allow herself to think of prophecy, except when alone in the hottest bath. She thought instead of Tywin. He had not sent for her this morning. He often sent for her when he wished to keep his swords where he wanted them. She put a finger to her lower lip, and the lip felt like her mother's had felt when Cersei was 14 and had touched it, doing her hair without being asked. "Luwin? No." That was a northern name. She did not care. The names belonged to soft men, had once told her that women press their lips to keep from speaking their truest thoughts. She did not press now. She concealed the thought by having another louder one. The Tyrells must be pressed more. They were as supple as willow. They bent, and then sprang back and choked the throat. Outside, the city moved its pieces, ignorant of the hand that had started to arrange them. Tywin kept arranging. He saw Kevin and offered him the kind of work that soothed his brother's good sense. A column of provisions to be guarded without fuss. A set of watch rotations that would put the steward's men where an accident might happen, if an accident were needed. He spoke with Qyburn about fire lanes and about small casks that could be rolled into a crowd and ignite without the spectacle of wildfire. His voice measured, as a physician's is measured. While describing amputation in the presence of a patient he intends to save. He sent a line to Mace Tyrell with the sort of praise that makes a man need more. He sent a different line to Olenna Tyrell, through the only person who could carry such a line. A cook who had once served in Highgarden's lower kitchens, and who had been permitted to go blind in one eye, rather than be cast out, because not all houses are made only of cruelty. The line said nothing at all, and so it could say anything when she read it. It consisted of a single lemon blossom pressed between sheets of parchment. Olenna, when she opened the petal and saw what had browned in travel, did not smile. "Well," she said to Margaery, who was feeding a small birdseed from her palm. "He has remembered that I preferred lemon to honey, and that my father had lemon groves that died, because he would not cut the water to the dahlias. He is telling me he knows the kind of thing I remember. That is almost rude." "What will you tell him?" Margaery asked. The sweet curve of her lips turned downward so her grandmother could not accuse her of laughter. "That I remember men," Olenna said, "and that dahlias are pretty when you can afford them." She put the petal back on the parchment as if it were living. A petal is not a flower. A gesture is not an alliance. But men of his sort live on gestures until the day they are hanged for actions. "Nandani Siwa." "Who will hang, grandfather?" Margaery asked, and the question was a joke and an answer both. They both looked east without meaning to. By noon, heat lay upon the city like a wet cloak. In the underways it turned the air into the breath of cellars. In the halls it flattened men's wits until only habit moved them. In the septs it drove prayer into a chant of endurance. Tywin ate standing, bread and olives, and a slice of cold mutton whose fat had waxed white. He dictated the list of names for a general levy that was not called a levy, and gave leave for 10 men from each 100 to be mustered for the roadworks to the Rosewad, and these, having no better occupation, would show up and lift stones and call themselves servants of the peace, and that would be the phrase written when they were moved to the head of a supply column, near Storm's End. He lived inside these arrangements the way some men live inside a symphony, hearing parts of it before the sound has reached their ears, certain of the note that follows the note beneath his finger. There were hazards he could not control. There was a girl in Marine who might decide tomorrow to turn north after turning west. There was Stannis, and the way he burned when he believed himself righteous. There was the iron question that sat in the harbor, like a prophecy in brown sails. But there were also mechanics, men and coin and breath and hunger. Those he could count. The boy had eyes like bruises. That meant the city would bruise differently when he put his heel down. Near sunset, when the heat withdrew to sulk, and the city took its first long breath since noon, John Connington stood at the parapet of a nameless inn on a nameless rise and watched the roofs run down toward the water. The light made them copper. He could have closed his eyes and smelled Griffin's roost if he let himself. He did not. He let himself see what was in front of him. He had returned to a place that had not left him. That was always the worst of returning. He had dressed his failure long enough to wear it like a fine shirt. Now he would wear another thing. And he could not yet tell if it would be sackcloth or silk. You would have had him say no, Aegon said from the stair. He had moved quietly for a boy raised among men. Connington heard him anyway. He had learned to hear, to feel the air change when his boy approached, the way fathers learn to hear. It shamed him to think the word aloud in his mind. So he did not. Shame was for later, or earlier. Not now. I would have had him say whatever made you safest, Connington said. And what does? Aegon asked. Connington let a long breath go. Not safety, he said. Nothing now is safe. There is only what is survivable and what works. And you believe him. I believe he thinks he is incapable of error, Connington said. That is a kind of man who rarely errs when it comes to the arithmetic of other men's lives. Aegon leaned his elbows on the parapet and let the city's wind press his shirt to his back. He had the thinness of a hawk that had not yet taken a stag's eye. He could take mice. He could take more if taught where to strike. He looked older when not speaking. When he spoke, youth rushed back into him like wine. If I marry his granddaughter, he said, she will be a crown of flowers around my throat if I am not careful. Flowers choke as well as roses cut. Then breathe where she cannot tighten, Connington said. Choose your counselors, choose your spies. Choose your truth, he will give you his. Take enough to not die of honesty. Aegon laughed again, a fainter version of the morning sound. Are there men who do not die of honesty? Yes, Connington said. The ones who die of swords instead. Below them, the city began to light its evening fires. A kettle beat. A child cried because his piece of bread had fallen into the dust and become a thing no longer to be eaten. Somewhere, a singer struck a wrong note and corrected it with a flourish that almost made his error art. Far off, beyond even the far hills, the sea drew its breath. A gull scraped the sky with white. Night would come, and the hand would move his lion again across some square none of them could see. In the street of pots, a fishmonger would empty his stall and go to his wife and be unkind to her without meaning to. A watchman would lean against a pillar and close his eyes for 1 minute that became 10 or you. In Maegor's Holdfast, a queen would press her lips and lift her chin. In the keep of the Kingsguard, a white cloak would be thrown over a chair rather than folded, and that tiny discourtesy to a symbol would be another little hinge upon which a small decision would swing, and thus a larger one. The realm did not change by cataclysm alone. It moved like a cart with a broken wheel, jarring, lurching forward. Tywin, at his table, leaned back and let his knuckles rest upon the edge of the map. His candle threw a thin light that made the luke-brown coast and the inked rivers glow. He held the pouch still beside his hand. He did not open it that night. He would open it when he wished to be convinced. He did not yet wish to be convinced. Conviction simplified too much. He wanted the world complicated where it could be, simple only where it must. He reached out and with 2 fingers moved the lion from Storm's End to a square of pale ink that represented a calcinated cliff. Beside it, sitting where he had placed it in the afternoon, A small onyx dragon waited. He set the lion so that the dragon's head faced the lion's flank. "Tomorrow," he said to no one, "to the candle, to the city, to the future which does not answer." He snuffed the wick between thumb and forefinger, and did not flinch when the hot wax kissed his skin. The room went dark, but not so dark he could not find the door. He did not need a torch. He knew this way. He had known it all his life. "Ah, Kate." Qyburn came to him without a sound, though men had been known to hear their own bones speak in terror when they saw that pale face. He closed the door carefully behind him and stood, hands folded at his middle as if in prayer, and inclined his head just so, the exact degree that said, "I am your servant, but not your hound." "You sent for me, my lord." Tywin gestured to the chair at the corner of the table, not the one directly opposite him. Qyburn took it. Candles breathed a thin, steady light across ledgers, and a plan of the city whose lanes had been inked and re-inked until the paper shone with a satin of oil. "We will have order in the streets," Tywin said. Without spectacle. Qyburn's hands, which other men did not like to see too closely, rested lightly on his knees. "Spectacle has its uses, my lord, but it is dear. Spectacles are for kings who fear they will not be believed," Tywin replied. "We will do with certainty. I want fire lanes cut through the worst quarter of Fleabottom. Not burned, cut. If houses must be pulled down, task the men who owe the crown back rents. They will labor to cancel their debt and think themselves fortunate. The lanes will take names that flatter piety. The Lane of Mercy, the Lane of St. Baylor's Breath. Men who live beside piety behave better when they are told they do. Dain, your charity is a blade with two edges." Qyburn murmured. "And what of the casks?" "They will exist where rumor places them," Tywin said. "Not wildfire. Your own concoctions. Smoke and heat enough to drive a crowd back. I will not have a spark run to the Guildhall, or the Sept, and set the city at prayer for a martyr they have invented for themselves." Qyburn's eyes had that brightness that meant his mind had jumped ahead. A vessel that releases on a draft and a judicious measure of. He stopped, not from modesty but from a habit of discretion he had cultivated until it looked like humility. "As you wish. You will also attend upon the mountain," Tywin said. He watched the small change that name made in the other man. It was not fear. Qyburn did not fear as ordinary men do. It was interest sharpened until it might be mistaken for pity. "Keep him alive, as your lordship commands." Qyburn did not ask why. The why was clear. Gregor Clegane's existence was a coin to be spent in more than one market. There were days when Tywin thought the world made of such coinage and of nothing else. "If there is a change in the market," Qyburn said, the ghost of a smile grazing his mouth, "I am prepared to render him down into any number of payments. A man of his dimensions is a vast economy." Tywin did not return the smile. "If the market changes, I will say when. Until then, he breathes." He inclined his head toward the city plan. "Tell the city watch sergeants that wine will be given out to their men only after the third bell past dusk, and only within the barracks. Any man found with a cup in the lanes will spend a night chained to the kennel. Let the Kettleblacks carry the tale. They are gossip with swords. They are also very thirsty," Qyburn said gently. "Then they will spend a night at the kennel quicker than the rest," Tywin said, and the conversation was over. When Qyburn had dissolved back into the palace's bloodless passages, Tywin sent for a courier who had no friends. The man who presented himself in answer to that order was of the kind King's Landing bred by the score. Thin, hard, unremarkable, with the quick eye of someone who had kept himself alive by never using any more of his life than he had to at any one time. Tywin dictated, and the man's lips moved as he learned the words for the journey to Sunspear. He would not carry a parchment. He would carry the shape of it in his head, the intervals and the breath, and the hook of a clause that snagged the listener's attention. In Dorne they prized courtesy that did not bow. Tywin furnished him with it. Words to Doran Martell were polished until they could hold a man's weight. Tywin set each like a stone in a dry wall. "We remember," he said without writing remember. There is an old justice that we do not pretend to teach to those who taught the world. There is a daughter who has been your guest and our pride, and will be what the future makes of her. There is a boy who is not a mask. There are heads that can roll. There are debts that can be paid in coin and in other currencies. There is sand, and there is water to make it hold. He put under the courier's tongue a price and a name. An old factor at Plankytown, once indebted to House Yronwood, now indebted to a different creditor. A pilot who knew the tide's gate. An innkeeper's eldest who had learned to hold his drink and his breath both. He said, when the man was done memorizing, "You are to forget the sense and remember the sound. Speak the sound exactly." The man nodded. "If I am caught, you will be caught at Plankytown by a man who is paid to catch you and hand you to another who is paid to lose you," Tywin said. "Do not improve upon the plan. You will only become an error." Then he, left alone once more, he became very still. In that stillness, the room assumed its true size. Small as a casket. It was not a sensation he disliked. Men who feared small rooms had not learned to make walls do work. He let the map lie unlooked upon and listened again to the city, which spoke to those who believed they did not listen. In the outer yards, a mule squealed its complaint at a wheel grease boy who had applied the grease grudgingly. A tray of pewter fell, and a squire cursed in the voice of a boy who has learned from men that curses prevent being struck. 2 girls laughed at the same instant, and one of the laughs ended in a caw. All these were a kind of timepiece. The city was at the hour when the cook's hands grew tired, and the day scribes were released to become nightmen. He called for Kevin. His brother came like a sober candle, steady, dependable, carrying the smell of leather and salt on his clothes, as if he had been into the armory. He had the good habit of not asking why he had been summoned. He waited until Tywin put a small iron token into his palm. A lion claw shaped into a hook. "Take 2 companies out the Roserad," Tywin said. "You will march with picks and carts and with 10 men from every 100 who owe the crown labor. It is road work. It is always road work, even when it is not. You will repair culverts between the 4th and 5th milestones, and you will billet at Tumbler's Falls, and you will do it with a ledger large enough to write 3 more entries than there are names. If a man comes to you named Caro or Gaunt, you will give him the 4th entry, which will not exist for anyone else." No. Kevin curled the hook into his fist. "Storm's End," he said without inflection, as if repeating an item on a list. "Some walls are too proud to be taken by ladders," Tywin said. "They are best taken by repairs." Kevin frowned a little frown that meant he was thinking, not whether but how. "And the Reach?" "The Reach will be told, the work is for them," Tywin said, which makes it true enough to be repeated without lying. When Kevin had gone and his dutifulness had removed itself from the room like a smell the wind takes away, Tywin let a long moment pass in which he did not think of the future. He thought of the past instead, in one clear slide of memory, and saw his children as they had been. Cersei with her braided hair and biting mouth. Jaime with his head cocked, and the soldier's ease already settled into his bones. Tyrion with his queer, hungry eyes that could not be taught not to ask. He did not dwell in the seeing. He did not permit himself long visits to rooms that had already been looted by time. He returned to the present as if stepping through a door. In the manse where Varys kept the boy, a jug of lemon water sweated itself into a ring on a table of cedar. Septa Lemore's hand smelled of the lemons. She had cut them with a little knife that had been sharpened so often the blade looked like a tongue. The boy, Aegon, drank and made himself drink slowly. Haldan Halfmaester had once rapped his knuckles and said, "A prince does not gulp. The world is already swallowing him. He must not teach it how." The admonition had been half jest, but Aegon had been young enough then to try to obey jests as if they could tame him. "Lord Connington says the hand means to put bread in mouths with my name in it," he said. "I do not know if bread tastes of names." "It does, when a mother fears to give it to her child," Septa Lemore said, wiping the mouth of the jug. She wore the plain gown she had always worn, the ring at her throat, the hair that would not stay wholly beneath its cover. If the mouth is fed without the name, she will be told later who saved her. Put the name in before they tell her. Aegon rubbed his thumb against the pottery of the cup. Its roughness pleased him. "He will have me marry the princess," he said. "The girl in Dorne." "Princess Myrcella," Lemore said. "She is a child, but there is sense in that which other men will call foolishness. A child can be taught to be a woman. A woman cannot be taught to be a child. And Dorne is a place of days that pass without weather." Aegon finished her sentence. "One of their old games. And of long memories. Lord Connington says I must learn to honor long memories without becoming one." Septa Lemore smiled with her eyes, which she often did when she refused her mouth the indulgence. "I have prayed," she said. "For me?" Aegon asked, with a boy's impudence. "For the city. It does not know what it wants. That is when prayer matters. When men want a thing and call it prayer, I turn my face away." Rolly Duckfield had oiled his sword earlier and left the cloth on the sill to dry, so the room smelled of lemon and oil and iron. It was a smell Aegon had known on ships and in tents, and in that miraculous hour outside Selhorys, when a woman had kissed his cheek and told him his eyes made her want to be better. He had asked her if that meant to be good, and she had laughed and kissed him again and said, "No, dear heart, better." He could not imagine Myrcella of Dorne kissing his cheek. He imagined her reading. He imagined her listening. That was stranger, and so it drew him. John Connington stood in the doorway a moment, considering the boy with an expression that had to be forcibly kept from becoming love. He had become very good at the forcing. "We go down into the city tonight," he said. "Lord Lannister would have you see where your name will be said when the bread is handed out, and not only the kitchens where the bread is baked. Put on a plain cloak." "Man. Plain cloaks make princes look like thieves," Aegon said. But there was excitement in him that he would not confess aloud. "Do thieves wear good boots?" "The ones who live long do," Connington said dryly. "And keep them shined." Aegon's hand went to his belt and the plain sword that Tywin had noticed. Rolly had scolded him the week before for rubbing the hilt when he was thinking, for it wears the leather wrong. He kept his hand still now, because he had decided that he could choose which scoldings to obey and still be a prince. It was a quiet kind of mutiny that made him feel more himself than any proclamation could. At the water gardens, Ariohota carried his longaxe like another man might carry his child. Easy, familiar, cognizant of every shift of its weight. Doran Martell sat with his feet in the shallow pool that reflected a sky as clean as glass. His feet were ugly. Age and pain had made them so. He did not mind. The water liked them anyway. One of the little princes, Trystane, skipped a shell across the bright surface and crowed when it caught the light like a small sun. A messenger had crossed the stepstones to Planky Town, ducked 3 nets, hired a boy who knew the current, the way a girl knows the path to her mother's room at night, and come up under the quay, where the city's noise becomes merely the working of men, rather than a proclamation. He had placed his memory in the ear of an old factor, who knew that the tide is not a thing that argues, and the factor had sent a rider who did not hurry, but who did not stop. It was Doran's way to let a man arrive before he was asked to speak, to let his breath even out, to let his heart cease its gallop. Ariohota saw the rider's shoulders drop 1 finger breadth when the prince nodded permission. "A Lannister's courtesy," the rider delivered, "for the Prince of Dorne who has taught courtesy to men who believed it theirs before they came to learn it. He remembers old wounds need bandaging before they need speech. He sends water for sand. He does not ask you to drink it until you have tasted it. A child of the West is a child of Dorne by your hospitality, and will be whatever the future writes upon her. There is a boy who is not a mask. There is a name you may be willing to speak again. There is justice." "Bam?" At the last word, Trystane looked up, because boys at the age of 11 love the sound of justice when they do not know yet what it costs. Doran watched his son, not the messenger. "Justice is a word men say when they want to end talking," he said. He took his feet from the water and let Areo dry them. "Tell me the shape of this water." "Storm's End," the messenger said. "Storm's End taken not by siege but by repair. Bread in the city. A marriage." "Many." "A marriage?" repeated Arianne, who had come while he listened. every movement in her fluid and exact. The way some women learn to make a man think their bodies are wine when they are in fact measured, dangerous thought. She smiled, and did not smile. To whom? To Princess Myrcella, the messenger said. And the water garden. Painted lions, orange trees. Children's shrieks that were not frightened, was suddenly a diagram in which lines turned red. Aegon did not tighten his grip upon the long axe, because that would have been to admit that he felt something in the air that asked for it. He merely remembered where Tiny had left the knife she believed he had not seen. Doran folded his hands over his stomach and looked at them as if they were a map. Tywin Lannister has learned to eat ashes without making a face, he said. He would have us do the same. It is a lesson I have had more practice with. He raised his eyes to the messenger. This boy, what is his name when the door is closed? Aegon, the messenger said. My lord. There was a small, involuntary sound in Ariana's throat that she made into a breath. Doran did not make any sound at all. Pain moved through him, and he sat perfectly still to let it pass. My brother would have laughed, he said at last. Then he would have sharpened his spear. He looked at Trystane. Go to your sums, he said. Justice is easier if you know how to count. Trystane obeyed without argument, which meant he had already begun to learn what his father wanted him to learn. When the boy had gone, Arianne sat, not beside her father but at an angle to him, where she could see his face, and he could not see her unless he chose to turn. If this is true, she said very softly. If Elia's son breathes. If, Doran said. A great and full word, daughter. What does he ask? Arianne said. Less than he will demand, Doran said. More than he has earned. A marriage to a girl who is a ward and a pledge both. He asks us to break an oath with sweetness. He offers bread and a head. A head, Arianne said. She looked at Ario then, and he looked back as one looks at the sea, without judgment, as at a thing that will always be there. Which head? Doran's mouth twitched, and then went grave again. The head for which my brother died. The head he almost took with his own hands. Oberyn would not have called it a head, Arianne said. He would have called it gratitude made flesh. Gratitude is a poor soldier, Doran said. But it eats well. Ariohota listened the way an oak might listen to birds quarreling in its branches, without the impatience of men who forget time. He heard the old Griff sit up and ask for wine. He heard, too, the new calculation cross the floor with bare feet. Doran looked out at the shining water. Write to them, he said at last to the messenger, who had no parchment. Tell the hand of the king that Dorne will not walk backward into yesterday without seeing the faces of those who claim it. He will send the boy where my eyes can look upon him. He will send the head he speaks of, not some patrician's skull polished in a vault. He will send back our child with the guard she deserves. And he will hear what I have to say of marriage. Then now, what will you say, uncle? Arianne asked, though she knew. He wanted a queen for Dorne, not a queen for the West. That Aegon Targaryen, if such he be, will take a Martell to wife. Doran said, lowering his feet once more into the water, whose coolness punished the heat in his calves. Not because we thirst for crowns, but because roofs are safer when you rebuild them with old rafters that have not cracked. If the boy is Elias' daughter will stand beside him. If he is not, then Myrcella is as fit a bride as any to bind a boy to us, and Trystane can live. He looked up and let the air leave his chest. I am tired of burying children. In the Red Keep, Cersei sat with Lancel's ghost and her own anxiety for companions, though the boy was alive and elsewhere, and her fears were not specters but familiar household gods. Pycelle shuffled back with a report that had no marrow in it. Movement in the lower ways, and none knew by whose leave. A whisper of Varys and of Tywin and of bread. She dismissed him with a flick of her finger that made him half smile, as if he had been granted a sweet. She had been taught as a girl that the men around her were tools, and she had believed it until she learned that tools can cut when turned in the hand. She went to the window and watched the city, which lay in the descending light like a sleeping cat, with one eye slit open. Her memory was not a good counselor, but it was an eager one. It offered her Maggie the frog's voice, wet, low, smelling of earth and old blood, and she pushed it away. It offered her Joffrey laughing with his mouth full of cake, and she pushed that away too. It gave her instead her father's hand on a map and his patience, which was monstrous. She hated him in that moment almost as much as she loved him. She could not tell where the one ended and the other began. She lifted a cup of watered wine and held it to her mouth and did not drink. She would not be drunk when she saw what he was making of her. At evening the heat loosened its grip and the city sweated out its temper. Aegon went with Connington and Raleigh, and a man of Varys choosing into Flea Bottom by the way of 3 alleys and a door that looked like a wall. They came upon a square where the watch had set up a trestle and 2 bakers' boys with fire-reddened arms carried out loaves that steamed and made the crowd moan. Aegon had never heard a sound like that. It was as if hunger had a voice, and the voice had a mother who had died, and a father who had not noticed. The boys put the loaves down. A gold cloak lifted his hand. The crowd did not surge. They did not dare. They pressed closer, but their hands behaved. They had been told that hands would be struck if they did not. "Say it," Connington murmured. Aegon hesitated. He did not want to say it as a boy says a prayer he does not understand because he has learned to fear not saying it. He stepped forward to the edge of the trestle, where a woman could see him beneath the hood, and a child might see the shape of his mouth when it opened. "E8," he said, because he had decided that some words mattered more for their being brief. "E8 for yourselves and for your children. Bread from the king's hand. And tea." Raleigh made a sound under his breath, surprise or approval or both, and the gold cloak repeated in a cry, because men need to be the echo of a thing before they believe they can be its origin. Bread from the king's hand. The loaves were passed, not thrown. A girl too small for her age bit, and then closed her eyes as if the bread had told her a secret. An old man took 2, and then, shamed by a glance from a woman who had only 1, broke 1 loaf in half and handed it to her. The half he kept. He did not eat. He thrust it down the front of his tunic with a defiance that said, "This is for later, when the world is not watching." Aegon watched the watching. He saw how the gold cloak stood so that their elbows did not ask for an excuse to strike. He saw how a single man in a rough brown cloak positioned himself by the corner of the trestle with his shoulder left open to the alley mouth. He saw a child take a 3rd loaf, and then put it back when her mother tapped her wrist. The mother did not look at the guard. She looked at the bread. He felt, for a brief, humiliating moment, the sting of tears. He had not earned their hunger. He did not yet deserve their thanks. He kept his hood up and his mouth closed. A woman with a baby on her hip looked up and met his eyes as if she had always known him. "Bless you," she said simply, to the boy she did not know at all. It was almost unbearable. He inclined his head. Raleigh's big hand fell a moment upon his shoulder and then left it. "Tomorrow," Connington said, when they were in the alley's breath, which smelled of old cabbage and piss and life. "Tomorrow and tomorrow, if the hand commands it. He will want his name said with yours. He will want you to know what his name buys." "Aegon, what does mine buy?" Aegon asked. Connington did not lie. "Today, a loaf and a story. If we are right, next year, a kingdom?" "The difference between those two is very great," Aegon said. "It is the only distance worth walking," Connington said. Olenna Tyrell received another flower the next day. Not a lemon blossom, but a sprig of rosemary. Clean and sharp as a needle. "He intends remembrance," she said to Margaery, who had taken to reading the faces of the kitchen girls to learn whether they were happy. "He intends it of himself. Men who remind you to remember them desire witness more than love." "Them? Is that worse?" Margaery asked. "It is more interesting," Olenna said. "Send him a stone." "A stone?" Margaery laughed. "A small, smooth one from the bank of a stream," the old woman said. "Wrap it in blue cloth. He will think of Rhaegar. He will not be able to stop himself. He will wonder how I knew what I only guessed. He will be wrong about me in a useful direction." She patted her granddaughter's hand. "You will go to the sept tomorrow. Wear white. Make piety look like something men might be tempted by." Tywin took the stone when it came. He did not allow himself to smile. He set it on the map at the mouth of the trident, and left it there as if it were a piece he might move. He sent back a sprig of bay, dried, bent, still scented when crushed. Olenna received it, and did not crush it. She let it lie upon her shelf, as a record of an enemy who did not need herbals to remember what certain leaves meant in kitchens and in histories. The man who knew Storm's End's inner stare came to Tywin not in disguise, but with the dignity of someone who would not be improved by being made to pretend. He was a steward's cousin, by his dress and speech, and he had the square hands of a man who had counted bolts of cloth and sacks of flour all his life, and thus understood that men themselves were often heavier on arrival than they should be if the weights were true. "I will not be the man who opens the gate," he said. "I will be the man who tells you which man will, when he is told the right words to speak to himself." Such a man exists in every castle. He has a wife who is tired, or a son who is careless, or a debt to a whore whose eyes are kinder than his own. He tells himself that he is choosing the time of a thing that must happen anyway. He is often right. Castles change banners the way seasons change light. It is a mercy to choose the day. And no, Tywin liked him at once. He did not praise him, because praise is a poor wage at the beginning of an arrangement. He set a purse down with enough coin in it to make a decent man swallow. "If I am satisfied, there will be another," he said. "If I am not, there will not be time for dissatisfaction." The man took the purse without fumbling. "My cousin's name is Rafe," he said. "He drinks only enough to be told he drinks. He has a son with a boil on his neck. He cannot sleep when the boy moans. He keeps the keys to the third stair because he has never lost a thing since he was 10 and found a brooch under a step that a lady had dropped. He is very proud of having given it back to her. He tells himself that honesty is its own reward. Such men often sell themselves for honesty when they have been taught that the buyers are benevolent." "Bane." "Rafe," Tywin repeated, fingering the purse as if it were a chess piece. Though chess bored him, chess taught men to think the board was simple. The world was a board with pieces that changed their shapes. Tell Rafe that honesty is a good wife who does not always satisfy her husband. He pushed the purse. Tell him that the marriage may be continued with compliments, and that a small indiscretion can be forgiven if it produces grandchildren. The man smiled without amusement. "You have raised many children, Lord Hand." "I have raised very few," Tywin said, and the man understood and did not ask more. The letter Doran sent came with the sea still upon it. Tywin read it twice. He admired it as one admires a knife found under a cushion when you are already seated. "The workmanship is fine. The situation is piquant." He read the condition. "The boy will be seen." He read the demand. "The head." He read the proposal that was not written as a proposal. "A Martell wife." He set the parchment down, perfectly flat, and did not move for 3 breaths. Then he rang for Varys. The eunuch came with eagerness trimmed to propriety. He took the letter without touching it. "He is less cautious than I am," Varys said when he was done, "and more patient than you are." "Send word to the boy," Tywin said. "He will be looked upon by Dorne in my house. Not in public. I will not have whispers outrun my horses." "And the head?" Varys asked. "The mountain coughs blood," Tywin said. "We will send the head that coughs no more. It will be the head they deserve. Give Qyburn leave to practice his pieties upon the remainder." "Benchow." "And the wife?" Varys asked, because someone had to say the unsaid when the room held only truth and pride and iron. "Will you tie your house to Dorne as well as to this boy? Or will you insist on the knot you prefer?" "I will insist upon it," Tywin said. And there at last was the smallest glint of iron pride shown openly. "My granddaughter is the rope with which the kingdom can be bound without fraying." "And if they will not take it?" Varys asked softly. "Then I will mend a rope while I make a chain," Tywin said. "Send for the girl when Dorne is ready to look. She will stand behind a screen and speak. They will hear the sense in her voice. I will let them think they chose. Men love to believe they have chosen the thing they were allowed to desire," Varys said. "It makes them feel clever. It keeps them obedient," Tywin said. When Aegon came to the Tower of the Hand for the second time, the room had been altered by small degrees. A tray of fruit stood by the window. The shutters were unlatched by one notch more, and the air came in without the soot of the smithy word. A second chair had been placed, not opposite Tywin but beside him at the map's edge. Aegon noted these things, and decided he liked that the Hand arranged rooms as he arranged men, in measurements that could be felt but not seen unless one was teaching oneself to look. "You will be looked at," Tywin said without preface. "You will not speak more than 3 sentences to any one man. You will let them speak to you, and you will remember their words as if they were pieces on a shelf. If you forget a piece, you will tell me, and I will remind you. You will not attempt to be charming. It is a poor currency with men who trade injustice. If they call you your grace, and you feel your blood rise, think of bread. If they ask you to swear in your father's name, tell them you do not swear lightly, because men who swear lightly lie. If they ask you to name your mother's favorite flower, say," and here Tywin's mouth moved a fraction, "that she kept her counsel like a rose keeps its scent." Aegon looked at him, searching for the joke that was not made. "And if they ask me whose grandson I would rather be," he said. "Tell them you prefer not to be anyone's," Tywin said. "And then, marry my granddaughter." Aegon let the words lie as if they were cards, and he was still learning the game. "I will do as you say. You will do as I say, until you have learned when you must not," Tywin answered, which was a gift and a threat both. "After that, you will do as you must, and I will decide whether to stop you." Connington stood behind Aegon and said nothing, and approved everything that could be approved of a bargain made with a man he despised and needed. Varys stood to the side and looked at the room like a widow who has learned to love the quiet of her empty house. They waited 3 days. In that time bread was given out each evening at a different square, with the same careful discipline, with the same phrase said in the boy's voice, "From the king's hand." Word loosened like honey, slow, and then, all at once, very quick. Storm's End steward's cousin spoke to Rafe, who told his conscience something it could believe, and held the keys to the 3rd stair without imagining how heavy they would feel when he no longer held them. Tywin moved small sums from one ledger to another, until a sum large enough to pay for traitors and loyalty both lay in the right chest. Olenna sent a single almond with a note that said, "One seed may be bitter or sweet, who can say?" Tywin ate the almond. It was bitter. He preferred it that way. On the 4th day, Ariohota came with 6 men of the Water Gardens in plain cloaks, and behind them Aerys Oakheart, in white with a face I have failed carved upon it. He looked at Tywin, and did not know where to put his hand, whether upon his sword or his heart. Tywin told him to stand at the door and watch, and to do neither unless bidden. A screen of carved wood had been set up in the inner chamber, its vines heavy, its leaves pierced so that a voice could pass without a face passing with it. Behind the screen, a chair waited, and beside the chair, a bowl of water with rose petals in it. It would make no difference to Dorne whether the petals were rose, or lemon, or orange. It would make a difference to Cersei when she smelled the water later. Doran Martell did not come. He sent 2. Nymeria sand, eyes and laughter that cut like glass, and a maester whose chain held 3 links that mattered here: silver, black iron, platinum. They did not announce themselves as judges. They did not need to. Aerio stood. He watched. He would carve the scene in his memory and show it to his prince later without speaking. Aegon stood not by Tywin but slightly forward, with the humility of a boy in a master's library and the quiet of a man who has been taught to listen to the sound his blood makes. "My lords," he said, because it was the first sentence of 3, and would set the tone of the other 2. He had decided that courtesy was not a bow. It was a way of making the other man believe he had chosen to like you. Nymeria's mouth curved. "Your eyes," she said, and did not finish the sentence, because she did not give gifts for nothing. "Who taught you your posture?" "Sir Raleigh Duckfield," Aegon said. And before him, a sailor who had once been a dancer. It was not the answer she expected. He saw her like him for that, and then save the liking for later when it might interest her to spend it. The maester asked for the song. Varys had told Tywin he would. The song that men who had been young with the prince had heard. The sad, bright thing with its late turn. The way a man remembers his house when he walks away from it. Aegon sang 3 bars, in a voice that had not yet found its man's depth, and then stopped. "My father did not finish it either," he said. He did not believe in finishing songs. He believed in beginning them, and letting them walk away. Bow. Nymeria's hand made a small, pleased shape in the air. "You have your father's talent for saying things that wound with politeness," she said. "It is a good talent for a king. It is a bad talent for a lover." "I will have to learn the difference," Aegon said. He made himself smile a little, because men believe a little smile more than a grave face. "If I am permitted." "Are you?" she asked Tywin, not moving her eyes from the boy. "He will learn what is necessary," Tywin said. "In the order I decide." Eris Oakhart's jaw worked. He bowed his head to hide it. He measured his failures in inches. An inch of sword perhaps too slow. An inch of door perhaps too wide. An inch of trust too freely given. Ariohota watched him as a man watches a horse that has thrown its rider 3 times and stands still and gentle afterward, ashamed of what it cannot help. The head came 2 days later. It had been washed. The hair had been cut to show the brow. The eyes were closed, and under the lids there was nothing left to open. The jaw sat at a noble angle that had little to do with nobility. Skulls keep their pride when men cannot. Ariohota looked at it in silence and memorized its weight, so he could tell Doran, who would ask, "Was it heavy?" It was. He would say, "Heavier than 2 swords." He would not mention the smell. He would not need to. Nymeria looked and smiled without mirth. "My father would have preferred to take his own bite," she said. "But he will drink this broth." She did not touch the skull. She touched the box and said, "We will send a message to Sunspear. The prince will write an answer of his own hand." She looked at Aegon. "It will not say yes. It will not say no. It will say later." She lifted a brow at Tywin. "You do not like later." "I do not," Tywin said. "But I know how to turn it into sooner." "Teach me," Aegon said quietly when the Dornish had gone and only the skull and the smell and Varys's powdered silence remained. "Teach me how to turn it into sooner without becoming like a man who has no later left to spend." Tywin put his finger upon the trident's mouth again and left it there until the wax on his skin from a candle cooled. "I will teach you arithmetic," he said. "The rest, you will either learn or die." Storm's End opened at night, as Tywin had known it would, not to an army but to a ledger. Rafe told himself the story he had been taught, that he was not betraying but choosing. He held the keys for one last hour and then gave them to the hand beneath the stair, which shook a little, and chose to believe the shaking was gratitude and not fear. The third stair was old stone. Water had worn it like a bite. Men walked in who had been called road workers 3 days before, and their boots made no more noise than mice. A man coughed, and the cough carried, but carried down, not up, because of the way sound behaves in old places. They found the inner door because the man had shown them where the light falls on it when you open the first door. They opened it. They moved through. At dawn, a banner hung from the chalk. It was not a lion, and it was not a rose. It did not need to be a dragon. It was a plain white field, with a single stitch of purple at its heart, a thread too small to see from the sea. The men within the castle put bread on the tables, and did not say which lord they served. They would learn at dinner. That was enough time for their stomachs to accept it. Mace Tyrell received the rumor an hour before he could have prevented it. He was told by a groom who had heard it from a girl who had heard it from a road worker, who had come to Tumbler's Falls to exchange his coin for a better shirt. "Storm's End," the groom stammered, too pleased to be the bearer to be prudent. "Storm's End has turned coats." Macy's mouth worked, and he looked at the sky as if the culprit might be God, and thus safe to curse. Olenna received the same rumor at the same moment, and had a cup of broth brought. "He is a very fast knitter," she said to Margaery, who counted the number of little girls at the gates of the sept and tried to decide which one would make trouble later in life. "He has made himself a stocking. Let us see if it fits." The city hummed with talk that had not been paid for. Cersei felt it as a pressure behind her teeth. She went to the hand's solar without sending a page ahead. Men moved out of her way because they always had. She did not knock. Tywin stood with his back to the room, as if the map were a window, and he were looking out of it at a field he was about to harvest. He did not turn immediately when she came in. He did not turn when she said, "What have you done?" He turned when she said, "Father," and the second syllable cracked as if it had decided to break itself rather than be broken by someone else. "I have provided for your son's future," he said. "My son sits the throne," she said. "He needs no future. He needs the present. He needs bread," Tywin said. "He needs men who will not run at the sight of their own blood. He needs a kingdom that can bear him. He will not have it the way he is now. He will have it because I will build it. Bow. And to do so," she said, stepping forward until her scent, citrus, wine, the ghost of something that used to be girlish, reached him. "You will marry my daughter to a pretender, and give my brother's killer to Dorne like a sop to a dog." "Your daughter will be queen," Tywin said. "Your brother is not dead." She flinched, hating that anyone could see that word strike her. "I meant my other brother," she said too quickly. Tywin let that lie. "And the pretender," he said, "will be what I make of him. If he is Rhaegar's, we will have placed the realm back upon a foundation that men will admire even as they resent it. If he is not, we will have used him until he can be discarded." Cersei's mouth curled. "And if he discards you, then he will be king," Tywin said, with the coldest joke he had made in years. "And I will be dead or retired. It will not be long." She stared at him. "What makes you so sure?" "I am old," he said, "and men like me do not enjoy grandchildren long. We are permitted to shape them, and then we go away." "None." She wanted to strike him then. Not in anger, but as a child strikes a stone to see whether it will ever move. She did not. She stood and counted, as Trystane Martell was counting, and found that counting does not comfort, but it clarifies. "You will ruin us," she said, and the US was a thing she could not define without weeping. She turned and went out, and Pycelle, who had been waiting with his ear to his own heartbeat, scurried to avoid her sleeve. Aegon slept badly. In his sleep he was a child again on a riverboat, listening to a song he had not learned to love. Men spoke above his head and said the words "prince" and "safety" and "die," and he wanted to speak, and could not. He woke and lay with his eyes open, and saw the ceiling's cracks as tributaries, and the moth that flitted like a bad thought. He got up and went to the window and looked down at a city that does not notice boys who cannot sleep. In the yard, at an hour when stablemen curse and bakers whistle, John Connington lifted a wooden sword and said, "Again," and Rolly Duckfield obliged him with a blow that would have broken another man's arm if given without care. Connington's hair drew the dawn's pale. He was sweating so freely, it looked like rain. He swung, and remembered a younger man who had not had to tell his body anything 3 times. He breathed and told his body twice, and it obeyed on the third. He dropped his guard and said, "If I die before you are king, you will forgive me. If I live, you will forgive me too. I have not always chosen well." Denderans. Aegon put his hand on the man's shoulder, and the sweat was clean as well water. "I would rather you lived," he said, "to see whether I learned." Connington smiled for real, like a man who finds an old coin under dust and knows he will buy bread with it and not keep it as a talisman. "Then learn faster," he said, and raised the sword again. Tywin received Doran's second letter at noon 3 days later, when the sun turned men's thoughts to shade, to water, to mercy. It was written in a hand that did not assert itself but did not shrink. Doran accepted the head. He would return the girl when certain arrangements were made for her honor. He would send Arianne to look with her own eyes upon the boy, if the boy would look back at her without asking to know whether she was to be his. He would not yet break the betrothal of Myrcella and Trystane. He would consider, the cruelest word in diplomacy, what it meant to have a king with a dragon's name and a wife with son in hers. Tywin let out a breath that was not quite a sigh, and not yet annoyance. He was not thwarted. He was slowed. He set the letter down with an exactness that suggested great calm. He looked at the map and moved a small onyx dragon half the span of his finger toward King's Landing. It was a move that felt like many things at once: the beginning of a march, the swelling of a rumor, a seed taking water. He sent for the High Septon, And when the fat man came in with his soft hands and softer voice, Tywin showed him a piece of bread, baked yesterday and left to stale, and broke it. You will say a blessing over loaves at the septi this evening, and you will say it in such a way that the city believes the king's hand is God's. Ah, the High Septon murmured, pinching at crumbs. The gods are very generous, Lord Hand. They are obedient when told the right story, Tywin said. Like men. By night, another loaf was broken and blessed, and a rumor went out like a lazy cat slipping under a door. A boy with old eyes had been seen in the square, and he had not taken the first loaf for himself. The rumor had the virtue of containing a truth, and so it prospered. A footman in the Tyrell manse told his lover that he had heard in the hall that Storm's End's Castellan's cousin had a son whose boil had shrank because the hand had sent a physician. The lover repeated it, with the addition that the boil had been a curse, and the hand had lifted it by saying a prayer. The next teller made the prayer into a song, and the song into the one that had been sung by a prince long dead. By morning, the boil had healed, and the city had another reason to talk about the past, as if it were a guest come suddenly to dinner. Doran sent Arianne. She arrived like dusk, a softening of edges, the awakening of other senses. She came with Nymeria and Tyene, and Obara's absence. Ariohota walked behind her with the patience of a tree. Aegon stood by the carved screen again, and this time he did not sing when asked. He said instead, I do not know the words that would please you yet. If I learn them, I will say them. If I do not, I will not pretend. It was as good a devotion as any. Arianne listened to the sound of him, and let it pass through her, as if it were wine she was deciding whether to drink. If you are who you say, she said at last, then you have an aunt who died for you, and a mother who did not have time to teach you your courtesies. I am neither of those women. I am merely the one who will decide whether my father's house will risk its last son for you. Do you understand that? Yes, Aegon said, because understanding is sometimes only the willingness to be told again. Good, she said. Then do not try to charm me. It would be a waste. Tell me what you want, and what you will do if you do not get it. Aegon thought of bread. He thought of the woman with the baby. He thought of Storm's End's keys, lying cold in a hand that had slept badly after their passing. I want, he said, to be necessary. If I am not king, I will be used. If I am king, I will be used. I prefer to be used in a way that leaves the country better fed. Tywin did not move. Connington did not breathe. Varys' lashes did not lift, and yet behind them the eyes were all attention. Arianne tilted her head and laughed once, softly. A pretty answer, she said. I will taste it again later and see if it is nourishing. She asked for Myrcella then, as if the girl were a card on the table. Tywin said that her return was arranged with honor. Cersei, when told, broke 2 small glasses and did not notice that her hands bled. Ariohota stood in the hall and counted the number of guards the Lannisters sent with the princess. He shook his head once. Tyene smiled and said, no one ever sends enough. And Ario said nothing, because he was sworn to listen. In Storm's End, Rafe knelt in the inner ward at dawn and told the Septon that he had sinned by opening a door that did not belong to him. The Septon told him he had done right by his family, and by a future that would not forget him. He did not say which future. He did not need to. On the Roserad, Kevin Lannister wrote in his careful, decent hand, culvert repaired, stones relayed, men accounted for. He added, in smaller script, where he knew his brother would look first, 1 man less than the ledger allows. He did not go on. He did not need to. In the Tower of the Hand, the onyx dragon moved again, a half-inch more toward the city. The lion did not move at all. It waited. Night drew its curtain. The map lay still. The skull in its box cooled another degree. The city breathed. Bread rose in ovens. In the Red Keep, a queen stood at her window and tried not to think of poison and prophecy. In Maegor's Holdfast, a boy king slept with his mouth open and dreamed of dogs. In the manse, A prince watched the place where dawn would come and confessed to himself that he wanted it to. In Sunspear, a man with swollen joints set his hands upon the sill and felt the wind, and told himself that perhaps this time, later, would be kinder than sooner. Tywin's candle burned to the scrape and died without smoke. He did not need it. He knew the path. He walked it. He did not stumble. He had never allowed himself that luxury. He put his hand on the back of the chair where the boy had sat, and the wood was still warm. He left it there until his fingers remembered the heat, and then he lifted them and made a fist and set it down lightly upon the table, exactly where the trident met the sea. Okay. Before dawn, the river ran black and close beneath the Red Keep, and all the city's fires were sleeping embers. Varys crossed a side court as if he were an idea and not a man, small and colorless in the half-light, and emerged beside a forgotten postern, where a lantern burned with the pinch of a cautious hand. The man who held it had a soldier's breath without a soldier's posture. His hat was plain, and his beard dyed a color that was neither wholly honest nor wholly false. "Your Grace," Varys said softly. Harry Strickland did not start. "Do not begin with mockery," he said. Consonants rounded by the free cities and softened by years of talking other men out of danger. "We will be what we must when we must." "You are well," Varys said, "because health is a courtesy offered to men who have done something unwise and survive. I am in lands where the winter is a rumor men use to hurry others to their purpose." Strickland answered. "Your letters were less coy." "My letters are addressed to soldiers," Varys murmured. "You are a captain general, a breed apart. I would not presume." Strickland shifted his weight. He had left his gold and black in a chest, and wore the brown of men who unload ships. Even thus, he carried with him the scent of a company's discipline, oiled leather, polish, pride. "We have taken Grassfield, and the Rainwood's edge without a cry went up," he said. "No one looked for us. They watched the Ironborn on the coasts and the river lords in their mire. Elephants were unwise, mercifully unwise," Varys corrected gently. "Men here are not yet prepared to see beasts from children's tales walking their grain roads. It unsettles their practical superstitions." "Your lion will unsettle their settlements," Strickland said. "He will want coin for these bread games." "He has coin," Varys said. "He has the will to use it where blunter hands would melt it into chains and call that policy. He asks your patience and your discretion for one more week. Then a castle will have changed its mind, and banners need not precede boys in cloaks any longer." He inclined his head toward the lantern. "You will not come to court. Your shoes are too honest." He smiled then, because he liked this weary man who carried within him old vows that had turned into habits. "Your oaths have been very faithful to a story, homeless Harry. Be faithful a little longer." "No. Strickland lowered the lantern. "We will be where we are not," he said. "We have practice." They parted like two sections of a wall that had closed on an enemy, and then reopened as if nothing had happened. In Sunspear, the wind came in from the sea fat with salt, and the palace's old stones breathed it the way old men do when medicine has given them one more summer. Hota stood on a gallery, watching the harbor take a small figure ship to the north. Myrcella's barge had been decked without display. That was Doran's insistence. "The world must not think we send gifts to the west," he had said, taking his pain like a cat takes water, resentful, resigned. "We return a child to her mother. That is all." Nevertheless, women had wept beneath their veils, and boys had scrambled for the last sight of her. Myrcella had stood with her hands upon the rail and not wept. When the trumpet sounded from the quay, she had turned her face toward the sound and set her chin. And in that gesture, Areo had seen both Lannister and something not Lannister at all. A steadiness that sat upon courtesy without crowding it. Trystane had come late to the quay, cheeks wet, but he had stood very straight beside her while the lines were cast off. He had only said, "You will write to me," in a voice that would have been ridiculous if he had been 2 years younger. But he was not. He was just enough a man to make the promise worth something. "Guard her well," Doran had said, and his voice had been no more than breath. Areo had put men on the ship, men who looked like other men, until you asked them to smile, and they could not. He watched the sail dwindle and listened to the little creaks a gallery makes when a heavy man shifts his weight. Doran did not come. He preferred to read the sea from shade and send Areo to look where the light was roughest. The barge took the girl. Sunspear swallowed its ache. Arianne returned to her father's side with a posture Areo had learned to recognize. She had been pleased, and she had not allowed her pleasure in anything to be a gate behind which folly might walk. She did not beg, Arianne said. That was what I most wanted to see. She is a Lannister, Doran murmured. They do not beg. They purchase. They barter. They threaten. They starve others and never starve themselves, if they can help it. She will marry a boy with a dragon in his pocket, Arianne said. Or she will not. Either way, she will remember that we wrapped her hair and did not cut it. She lifted a brow at Areo. Oakheart's mouth tasted of ashes when he bowed. Areo inclined his head. He could not decide whether to kiss the floor or his blade. The floor is gentler, Arianne said. At evening, the carved screen in the Tower of the Hand had a different scent in its carved vines. Rose petals had dried and gone to a papery, delicate brown. In the bowl floated lemon slice and bitter orange rind. Arianne's laughter lay between the chairs like a silk ribbon someone had dropped and half forgotten. Aegon sat and did not reach for that ribbon. He had learned to keep his hands still around things he wanted to pick up too soon. You have eaten in our city, Arianne said. The candlelight made a new depth in her eyes that might have been kindness and might have been calculation. In Dorne, those two were cousins who shared the same house. I have, Aegon said. Bread baked in Ash Alley, watered wine in a tanner's court, and an orange sold to me by a girl who tried not to smile when I told her the orange in this city tastes like the idea of an orange rather than an orange itself. She will be a queen of some sort, Arianne said. A girl who sells an idea without tasting it is fit for a throne. Aegon laughed softly. He made himself remember they could be testing him simply to see if he laughed. He said, if the throne is wooden, she will be warm. If it is iron, she will be careful. I am not certain which is better in a queen. Then, in Dorne, Arianne said. We have not sat on a chair with blades, but we have cut our fingers on the arms of chairs we thought were carved kindly. The better queen is the one who puts oil on the wood and a knife under the cushion. Then I will oil the wood, Aegon said, with such plainness that Connington stirred once, as if to tell the boy to leave some things unsaid. Aegon did not look back at him for help. He had stopped looking back during the third day, when he had watched a boy slip a broken loaf into his shirt. Will your father give me a wife? He asked, and the question was not bluntness. It was what you ask when you are measuring walls. Arianne tilted her head, pleased perhaps with the boy's choice to swim into trouble, rather than be carried there by older men. My father will not give you anything, she said. He will trade. He will trade slowly. He will trade as if the market will be open for another 15 years, and he may browse. This will anger your lion. He will push. My father will not move. You will think you can move my father. Perhaps you can. Perhaps you cannot. The only thing that moves my father is the thought of what happens after he is dead. If you can make him see a day when he is a song sung by those who have not lost their houses, you may have a Martell bride. No. And if I cannot, Aegon said, then you will have a Lannister bride, Arianne said. And this time the laughter in her voice became audible, if still soft. And you will be a man tied very close to bread ovens and very far from spears. Do not misunderstand me. Both are necessary. Only one will break on your skull. It was well said and true, and it stung more for its truth. Aegon let it sting. He had decided, somewhere in the river tunnels, that he would allow himself to be hurt by truths and not by flattery. I will have to be many things, he said, which was both admission and ambition. You will, Arianne said. You will have to learn to choose which of yourselves sits at your table on any given day. Have you met your mother's faith? Aegon frowned slightly, tasting the turn. I have met men who spoke of the seven like men speak of the weather. They will endure them. They will complain or bless, according to their inclination. In the city, they bless for bread. Then, your grandmother was of Dorne, Arianne said. She knew a god. The god that is patience. The god of women who wait and then put their hand on the knife. We do not speak his name to strangers. Am I a stranger? Aegon asked pleasantly. You are a boy who believes he is not, Arianne returned. That is more dangerous than a stranger. She asked to see the head. It had been sent. The box had been opened for Nymeria and closed again. Men argued in low voices over whether to open it a second time for a princess with a prince's mind. Tywin allowed it because he had counted this already. A servant, silent in the way Qyburn taught the men who carried his instruments, lifted the lid. The stony face within did not change. Arianne looked, and she did not look away. My father will tell you this is not enough, she said. He will ask for the man to be hanged in our sun, not pickled in your shade. He knows that is not possible, but he will ask. Promise you will let him ask. I can promise to listen, Aegon said. The rest is another man's promise to make. He turned slightly, and did not need to look to know where Tywin stood listening for the sound of promises. Tywin spoke to Qyburn while the others breathed. The physician's hands looked at ease beside jars of his own thought. You will keep what you kept alive, Tywin said. You will show it the mercy you know. If a man comes with a writ to see the body to satisfy a southern prince's scruple, you will show him a man whose features are enough to please the pious and whose teeth will match a mold we have kept. Very good, Qyburn murmured. He gives us his last, and we render him into uses he never imagined. I have found that the dead are more grateful students than the living. Men say that of children, Tywin said. They are wrong. Children argue with the hand that feeds them. The dead have accepted the arithmetic. Arithmetic, Qyburn echoed, not in mockery, but in appreciation. You give numbers weight, my lord, until they are flesh. They were always flesh, Tywin replied. Men forget it because they like to pretend that a ledger will not bleed. In the Reachman halls, the rumor of Storm's End turning grew harried by the rumor of bread that had been blessed by the High Septon in the presence of a boy who had not taken the first loaf for himself. Mace Tyrell tossed in his chair and blustered to men who would someday write the minutes of this time, with the word decided where the truth was endured. We cannot be everywhere at once, he complained, as if logistics were an affront arranged by petty clerks. We are at the Mander, at Dragonstone, confoundedly at the small council. He looked for his mother and found only her lace and her smell of old gardens and cutting remarks. Olenna let him pour himself out, and then allowed 2 drops of truth to fall into his cup. You are precisely where you are told to be, dear boy, she said. What the lion is telling you is that your banners are hands and his are fingers. He can pick locks while you clap. Clap, Mace sputtered, then subsided. Because he was not a fool, merely a man poorly served by his confidence. Then we will put our fingers to work. You will put your thoughts to work, Olenna said. Fingers are for men who do not mind dirt under their nails. You mind dirt. I mind dirt. Let the lion have his alleys. We will own the windows the alleys look up to. She sent for Margaery and asked her to change the color of her sash for the next service, white to blue, and to pat the heads of 3 children and 2 old women, and to stand beside Tammin until the boy smiled of his own accord. And do not speak to Cersei, she added. Words are her weapons. Yours are your eyes and your hands. Use those. Let her grow tired swinging steel at air. Cersei did not grow tired. She grew sharpened. She left the sept by a different door, and took a turn through the King's Gate where the smell of the river could scrape at her stomach, and made herself look down into the press that muttered about bread and blessings and boys. She gazed at them with the disdain of someone who has never been hungry and resents anyone who pretends hunger is something noble. She went out to the yard where the yard had once pleased her, when Joff had been small enough to be coaxed and praised, and not yet full enough of his own meanings. She remembered Tywin's hand on his shoulder, heavy and calming, as one puts a weight upon a skittish horse. You will do as I say, until you have learned when you must not. He had told Joff once. Joff had laughed. Tommen did not laugh. Tommen looked at his cat. Cersei lifted her hand and crushed a rose petal between finger and thumb, and smelled perfume where she had hoped for something honest. "Your Grace," Pycelle chuffed, appearing as if he had been stored behind a tapestry. "The Prince of Dorne has written again." "Which?" she said curtly. "The old one, or one of the vipers with breasts?" "The Prince," Pycelle said, his disapproval of women who had minds like men's poorly hidden beneath a smear of sanctimony. "He offers the girl's return." "That has been arranged," Cersei said impatiently. "He asks," Pycelle ventured, "that her honor be observed." Cersei turned her head slowly and gave the old man a gaze that had taught stronger men to swallow without choosing it. "My daughter's honor is a thing I know better than any man with fat cheeks," she said. "Have a litter ready when she comes through the gate, and do not let the crowd touch the curtains. I do not want fleas." In the manse where Aegon slept when he could sleep, Haldan Halfmaester had set out 3 maps and 3 histories. "You will read about Baelor the Blessed and think piety makes peace," he said. "You will read about Maegor and think fear makes peace. Both are wrong. Peace is made by stomachs agreeing with one another. This is vulgar. That is why it is true." "Bah. If I become king," Aegon said thoughtfully, tracing a river's run with his thumb and feeling the paper thin under his skin. "Will you allow me to be vulgar?" "I will force it upon you," Haldan said. "Every morning with your porridge. And in the evening I will permit you grace if you have earned it." Septa Lemore sat with her needle and made a small mark through cloth. "He will not be allowed to be vulgar with his wife," she said without looking up. "So he must find another place to spend his coarser appetites. He must learn to be clean in both." "Ben? Hey," Raleigh Duckfield said complacently. "Has no appetites that need commenting upon while he can barely keep his blade steady in a cross wind." Aegon's mouth curled. "You praise me to keep me obedient." "I praise you when you are good," Duck said. "I scold you when you are careless. I tell you stories when you are tired. I do not flatter you. Leave flattery to the men who want you weak." "Do you?" Aegon said, glancing toward Connington with a lightness that did not deny weight. John Connington stood with his hand on the sill. His knuckles were white. He had been a handsome man once. He was still handsome enough to draw eyes and then repel them with the iron behind his gaze. "I want you alive," he said. "Weaker men sometimes live longer. I am greedy. I want you strong and alive." Aegon did not say, "I want you alive too." He had learned that tenderness between men is a language that attracts spies. On a day when the city smelled of tin and hot milk and stale incense, Tywin received the steward's cousin again. The man stood with his hat in his hand and did not wring it because he had taught his hands not to perform themselves in that old play. "Rafe has no sleep left in him," he said. "He has bought his boy a salve. The boil goes down. He tells himself that doors open when doors must open. He says his father told him that a man can drown standing still in a place where the tide is only ankle high if he stays long enough without moving." "Pay him again," Tywin said. "Tell him that treading water is a fine art, and that some men are praised for it in song. And send him away when the gates are yours. Men who have been useful are at risk of being asked to be useful twice." "Ben no wonder." The man nodded once. "Will you put your own men in the stair?" "No," Tywin said, with the confidence of someone who had not learned what fear feels like to other men for many years. "I will put men who owe the crown labor. A man who believes he is paying a debt will guard the gate better than a man who believes he has been singled out for a favor. He will not question why he is there. He will be grateful." "Your lordship thinks like a priest," the man said, not unkindly. "No," Tywin said. "Priests think like men who wish to be thanked. I think like a man who does not care to be thanked." Varys brought the news of the first small towns near the Rainwood bending. He set it down like a plate. "I did what you wanted," he murmured. "I told them stories about a boy with old eyes and a solid boot and a desire to be useful." "Men will follow a useful desire," Tywin said, not looking away from the map. "For a while. Then, they will need more. Stories are kindling. Grain is wood. Law is coal. Find me a mason in each of those towns, and tell him he is to build a little hall. with his own name carved very small upon a stone at the door. He will do it if he believes his name will live. And what will the hall be used for? Varys asked, delighted by the smallness of the thing. He loved small things. They were safer to admire. Bread in the morning, Tywin said. Oaths at noon. Wine in the evening. It will keep men in the habit of gathering. Habits are kingdoms you can build with your hands. Menno. When Myrcella came home, the city behaved as if it had just realized it possessed a heart and had been ignoring it. The litter was plain, but the crowd made it flower. Girls threw petals stolen from the sept gardens. Boys ran alongside with their tongues out, as if they might catch some sweetness in the air. Cersei watched the curtains with a mother's fury, and was surprised by the gentleness that rose in her when Myrcella's hand, slim, bare, appeared and drew them back 2 inches to show her face. She had grown. She looked like a story where someone is hiding. Cersei held her breath, and then let it go, and forced herself to walk slowly down the steps, so that the girl would not run. They embraced as if they had both been instructed, and had learned the lesson better than the teacher had hoped. For an instant, the court did not exist. Tywin, standing behind and to the right, allowed that instant to be long enough to be remembered, but not long enough to be dangerous. Ariohota counted the men within 10 paces of the queen, and found that count acceptable. He lifted his chin to the young men he had brought. They did not move, which was the right movement. Arianne watched from a balcony, not the highest, not the lowest, a place where the wind reached, but did not bully. Her mouth softened. She told herself it was calculation. She was a woman who instructed herself sternly when she felt something that might later ask a price. Aegon did not look upon the reunion. He stood in a cool court, with a fountain shaped like a fish, and listened to the noise from the outer yard. "She is home," he said. "How do you know?" Connington asked. "I can hear a mother forgiving a debt the world owes her," Aegon said. "It has a different sound." Connington's mouth tilted. "Then you will hear another sound soon. The world will begin collecting on its loans." The small council met with the air of men who would have preferred to eat. Mace Tyrell's queries had lost some of their fat. Pycelle smelted his words into little pellets he could drop like buckshot. Varys folded himself into absence until needed. Tywin spoke of Storm's End as if he were discussing the price of salt fish. "It is taken," he said. "We will acknowledge that publicly when it pleases me. For now, we will send a levy of road workers to repair the sea face, and we will change the Castellan who has become enfeebled." "Now, enfeebled," Mace sputtered. "We have many stout men. We have few stout men who are not married to their own importance," Tywin said. And Mace deflated at once, because the old lion could insult him without making him feel the blow, until later when he was alone. "Dragonstone." Lord Giles coughed into his veil. A sound like charred parchment. "Sir Loras." "Sir Loras is brave," Tywin said. "He will be braver if he is told that the Reach requires his example. Send him a letter written in his father's hand." He looked at Mace until the man's eyes filled, and then he looked away, granting small mercy. "The king will bless bread again tonight. The High Septon will say the feast of St. Beller comes earlier than expected." "Saints," Cersei said coolly from her chair, where she sat without a crown, "because sometimes power is better without weight, do not come early. They come when we need them." "Which is what I have just said," Tywin returned, with the faintest shadow of weaponized courtesy. Night brought Aegon to the sept again, not to stand beside the septon, but to stand under the transept, where people crowd and call piety by the name of habit. He watched the old women pucker their mouths as the loaf passed. He watched a boy lift his sister up to see. He watched Tommen, small and chubby and earnest, hold out his hands for the blessing, and then look sideways at the Queen of Thorns, as if she might explain why it mattered. Margaery had her blue sash and her hair covered with a veil so fine it said, "I am not ashamed to be divided from my beauty, but I remember it nevertheless." Aegon's heart moved in his chest. It was not love. It was a recognition of the craft of governance. It had a sort of love in it the way respect has warmth. After, he went out by a side door and breathed the night air, and Varys slid out of the darkness as if the night itself were a friend. "You will be tired," Varys murmured. "I am," Aegon said. "But I am more something else than tired." He searched for the word, and found it after a moment. "Necessary." "It sits well on you," Varys said. "Some men find necessity pinches." Aegon could not help it. He laughed quietly. "I will have calluses where it rubs." "Calluses are crowns," Varys said, "worn under the gold." In Storm's End, the men who had been called road workers washed their hands of chalk dust and sat in a hall that smelt of beans. They called their paymaster, the tall man with the lady's voice, because Varys fussed over punctual sums as a grandmother fusses over stew. A mason sat with them, staring at his hands. He had been told his name would be carved onto a stone. He had never seen his name outside the parish clerk's book. He traced it on the table with a wet finger and watched it vanish. On the third night in King's Landing after Myrcella's return, Cersei went to the girl's chamber after the last watch was called. She found her child awake and sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands on her knees, learning again the furniture of this room she had left when her bed had been smaller. Cersei sat beside her and smoothed her hair and said none of the words she had been practicing for days. "Are you afraid?" she asked instead, not a queen but a mother who had run out of time to pretend. "A little," Myrcella said. "Men look at me differently. They look as if I were a coin too large to spend without asking." "Now," Cersei's mouth twisted. "Do not let them spend you," she said. "Even when it is I who ask. Especially then." Myrcella turned her face up, fair in the candlelight. "Grandfather wants me to be a queen. He wants himself to be the father of queens," Cersei answered, which was an answer crueler than the girl deserved. "He will be both whether we desire it or not, but he will not be the father of us." "What am I to want?" Myrcella whispered. "Everything," Cersei said. "And to pay nothing." Myrcella lowered her eyes. "That is difficult." Cersei laughed without joy. "That is why men call it sin when women do it. Sleep." She rose and left, and only in the passage did she put her hand to her mouth and breathe until the dizziness left her. Arianne went again to look upon the boy. She took him away from screens and led him to a terrace where the city lay like a map, each lamp a pin, the black ribbon of the river unrolling. "If you are king," she said, "what will be the first lie you allow to be told about you?" "That I am merciful," he said at once, "so that men will risk asking." "And the second?" she pressed. "That I am hard," he said, with more reluctance, "so that they will hesitate to abuse the first." "Good," she said. "The third?" "That I am inevitable." She smiled then, teeth very white. "That one you must earn." "I am trying," he said simply. "We see that," she said. "We see also that the lion who feeds you will eat you if you stop moving. Keep moving." Aegon looked down at his hands. The callus had grown. It pleased him that he could be marked by effort and not by blood alone. "Will you be my friend?" he asked. Surprising himself, Arianne's expression softened. "I will be my father's daughter," she said, "which means I may be your friend and your enemy and your wife's ally and your aunt's judge. I will be Dorne." "That is an honest answer," he said. "I did not say I would only tell you honest ones." She returned lightly. "Men waste honesty if they are given it too freely." When dawn came, the city smelled of smoke and new bread. 5 men in rough cloaks walked across the fish market, with a long box between them. The watch did not stop them because they were meant to be seen and not inspected. The box went to the sept and was set before the altar as an offering to justice. The High Septon blessed it and did not open it. He did not need to. He blessed the idea, and the crowd sighed. It is easier to bless an idea. It makes no objection. Qyburn, looking on from the side aisle, admired the old man's restraint and counted the ways in which symbols are more powerful than flesh and far cheaper to keep. Tywin stood at his window, and allowed himself to feel a small portion of what other men called triumph. He did not like the word. It had trumpets in it and a habit of leading men to do foolish things. He called it correctness. Storm's End held. Bread held. Dorne had not said no. The Golden Company had shown itself to be the sort of instrument a hand could play for a time without it deciding to choose its own tune. The Reach's temper had been pruned, and Mace had done as he was told, because the world had told him to. The city could speak without summoning fire. His grandson slept. Tywin. His daughter had not poisoned anyone for 3 days. The boy, when he thought of him, came with the sound of a wooden practice sword, and the look of someone who had decided to learn and not to be dazzled by learning. Tywin had known many boys. He had made and unmade some. This one had the best chance of not disgusted him. He moved the onyx dragon a little more, and set the lion in such a way that the dragon's head sat under its chin. He did not press them together. He left an inch. Men need inches, he thought. It is where denial lives. It is where hope lives too. He did not refuse hope when it cost nothing. In the Stormlands, the Golden Company's banners remained folded. Strickland walked among his men, and reminded them that patience is not the same as idleness. They sharpened steel. They mended leather. They learned which wells were sweet, and which were brackish. A boy with a face full of fear practiced and stopped, shaking after the 50th cut. He looked up and saw his captain general watching him and did not blush. Strickland nodded once. The boy's heart steadied. It is always like this, Strickland thought. We prepare, and then we pretend that we are surprised by what preparation buys. We must keep the pretending sincere, or we will cheat ourselves out of the calm we live on. Kevin's column returned to King's Landing ragged with heat, and with the calm of men who have accomplished tasks without earning glory. He reported with his voice steady and his cuff brushed clean. Tywin tried to praise him and did not quite manage it, because praise sat ill on his tongue when given to equals. Kevin understood. He did not need it. He slept that night as soundly as a man may in a place where the walls talk. Cersei lay awake. She counted not sins, but slights. She feared she had lost the habit of telling one from the other. She rose and walked to Myrcella's door and stood with her hand upon the latch, and then took it away. She walked to Tommen's chamber and watched him sleep with his mouth open, and his hair tangled, and hated him, and loved him, and hated herself for both. She whispered, "You will not be a pawn," and knew at once she was lying. She whispered, "You will be king," and knew she was telling the truth, and that the truth was merely a larger lie. She went back to her bed and lay very still, and tried to remember the time before any of this had needed names. Aegon dreamed of the river again, but in the dream he chose the tunnel, and the boat did not turn of its own accord. He set the pole and pushed, and the boat responded, and he felt the weight of moving through a thing that does not wish to be moved. When he woke, he knew that today there would be more bread and another alley, and the thought that he might be asked to speak longer than 3 sentences to a man whose breath smelt of leek and wine. He wondered whether he could keep the boy he was from stepping forward and saying something too quick. He wondered whether he wanted to. He wondered whether a man can hold 3 or 4 selves in his one body and not break. He rose and washed and took a piece of cold bread and ate it without butter, and did not like it, and ate it anyway. He put on the plain cloak and tied it himself. When he opened the door, John Connington stood there and looked at him, and the 2 men smiled the smallest of smiles. It felt like the best of all blessings because it had taken so long to be earned. "Again," Connington said, as if lifting the wooden sword, and the day began with the sound of something solid striking something solid. It was an honest sound, and in a city that had learned to live on stories, honesty for an hour was a thing worth the stir it made in the chest. By midday, a man in the Ragman's harbor said to his wife, "If this boy is a lie, he is a useful one." She said, "All boys are lies until they become men," and took another loaf while the watch looked the other way. At sunset, in the water gardens, Doran set down a letter, and closed his eyes, and put his hands on his knees, and nodded once as if he were kneeling in a temple. "Later," he said. "Later is coming." When the bells of the city spoke the 2nd hour of night, Tywin allowed himself a single small glass of wine. It tasted of apples stored in cedar, and of endings. He did not drink it for pleasure. He drank it to remind himself that sweetness exists, and that men will follow it longer than they will follow rightness. He set the empty cup down and touched the map once with his palm. He had always liked the feel of old paper. It is how a thing remembers being made. He slept then, his head full of ledgers and alleys, and a boy's quiet voice. The candle guttered at last and went dark without smoke. He did not wake when the wind turned. He did not need to. He had arranged the world in such a way that even the wind, for a little while, would assist him. How long that little while would last lay in the hands of gods who did not exist and men who did. The city breathed. The river went on. In the yard, a cat leapt lightly to a wall, and paused, and looked toward the Tower of the Hand with the grave curiosity cats give great houses. It yawned and went on upon its soft business. Above, the onyx dragon sat a finger's breadth from the lion's jaw. In the space between them lay the future, invisible and inevitable. The inch that would be closed or not closed by hands that shook or did not shake at the moment a door turned on its third hinge in the night.